Okay, good evening, ladies. This is my first, if you like, video in American Survey. And today, for this video, I'm going to talk about William Cullen Bryant's poem, Thanatopsis. Really, this is an interesting, rather maybe long poem, but it's very interesting to some extent to deal with, again, which is an amazing idea. I think I've mentioned this to you before, about the theme of death everywhere in American literature, which is, I think, very much, to some extent, I think, to do with the American guilt in a way. Bryant, William Cullen Bryant, and the title, as you can see, is called Thanatopsis, which is, again, the word originally from Greek means death, and how death maybe would look like. Now, a lot that this poem is all about death, as I said, which is a very funny, common, really common theme throughout American poetry and even the novel and short stories. Now, Bryant picked up this title for his poem and suggested, to some extent, to say that he's a classy writer. He's going back to the classics, to the Greeks and so on. He knows enough about the ancient world, if you like, and the tradition of poetry, and, in this way. So Thanatopsis starts by talking about nature's ability to make us feel better. The speaker tells us a lot, that nature can make pain, if you like, less painful. It can even lighten our dark thoughts about death. He tells us that when we start to worry about death, we should go outside and listen to the voice of nature. Really, this is maybe one of the main big questions here. So that voice reminds us that we will indeed vanish when we die and mix back into the earth, nature. The voice of nature also tells us that when we die, we won't be alone. Every person who has ever lived is in the ground, if you like, the great tomb of man, he said. So, and everyone who is alive will soon one day, of course, be dead and in the ground too. So this idea is meant to be a little bit maybe, comforting. And the poem ends by telling us to think of death like a happy, maybe dream-filled sleep. Now, if I go really quickly, maybe explaining the poem line by line, I think it will take me ages to finish. But I'll quickly maybe go through some lines before I really summarize the whole thing by talking about the main themes and ideas about this poem. Now, if you look, for example, about the first line, few lines, notice he begins line 1, to him who in the love of nature holds. Here he's, talking here about, if you like, something like confusing here to say, reading to whom, through it, to the middle of the third line, we say here, it's about, the question here, let us go back and see. The speaker here is introducing us to a certain kind of man who loves nature. He's saying, I'm writing this to anyone who really loves nature, if you like. Again, line 2 say, communion with her visible forms she speaks. This man has an almost holy relationship with nature, as you can see. He holds communion like you would do in a church with things like rocks and trees and rivers. Those are examples of visible forms of nature. In these moments of communion, nature actually speaks to this man. Nature is the she here mentioned at the end of this line. That's an example, again, of personification, or a pretty, really common poetic trick everywhere you find. Here we will go back again, or we'll go along with Bryant and use the capital letter N to go for nature, because in this case, nature, or she, is more, if you like, in capital N. And he goes on in line 3 and 5, a various language for his grayer hours. She has a voice of gladness and a smile and eloquence of beauty, and she glides. Now here you can see nature talks to her lover in different ways, depending on the way he's feeling. When he's feeling happy, for example, you can see nature smiles and she speaks to him happily with a voice of gladness, as you can see. In these moments, of course, she has again the eloquence, smooth and lovely speech of beauty. And you can see really the poem throughout, if you like, really is very amazing, romantic, though the topic is death and grave and so on. But really, there are a lot of romanticism about it. So notice again in lines 6, 7, and 8, into his darker musings with a mild and healing sympathy that steals away their sharpness ere he's aware when thoughts. Again, here you can see sometimes the lover is feeling despairing or is brooding over depressing thoughts. Then nature glides in and makes him feel better. In these moments, of course, nature treats him with gentle sympathy, which heals him again. And again, you say she takes away the pain, means nature, the pain sharpness of thoughts before he even realizes it. Basically, really here, when this man is feeling lousy, nature fixes him up. She might even take him, if you like, or if you like, give him or, whatever, offer him some kind, of cookies, if you like, which is really, again, a very amazing thing that we find everywhere in this poem. Now, line 9, 10 again, of the last bitter hour come like a blight over the spirit and sad images. Still here, this man is not just having any old depressing thoughts. He is really worried about death, the last bitter hour, which is, of course, death. These thoughts about death come like a plague or a disease, a blight on his spirit. Again, by way of blight is a pretty good word. Again, you can see it's good. It's often used really when referring to diseases plants get, for example, some kind of blight, if you like, for example. Did you, for example, see the happiness or what happened here? For example, the speaker of this poem is not just really talking about a random lover of nature. Now, of course, the hymn from line 1, if you like. So all of a sudden, he's talking about you, people, readers, listeners, us, if you like, real people. Here, for the first time in line 10, he talks about thy, means your spirit. The poem has switched from using about nature to giving you advice. And I think this is, again, a very interesting thing to be invited into the poem, we as readers or listeners. On line 11, as you can see, again, of the sternly and shroud and pall. We are, again, here very sure, things that everyone has thought about it. Again, when they will be dying, of course, what will be, it will be when we die, for example. I think we have all thought maybe a little bit about it when we are going to die, for example. So here the speaker gives us some strong images, thoughts, if you like. He talks about the stern agony of dying, which we think is a great phase. Death does not just hurt, really, it hurts in a sharp, absolutely severe, serious way. We think of mean substitute, if you like, in a way here, substitute teachers and hall monitors as being stern. But usually those people do not cause agony, Death does, though. The speaker also uses a couple of useful, really death-related words, like a shroud is the cloth you use to wrap up a dead body, for example. And again, the word the pall is another good, scary death word again, which means, again, could mean a cloth that covers a coffin, or it can mean the coffin itself in a way, like with pallbearers, like at a funeral, for example. So in line 12 again, he said, and breathless darkness and the narrow house. Again, here we get some more death imagery. Only this time, really even scarier. The speaker helps us imagine the breathless darkness of the grave and the narrow house of the coffin. These lines are really claustrophobic, aren't they? You can see that. They make us feel like we are trapped in some suffocating prison. We are, panicky now, if you like. So line 13, he goes on, make thee to shudder and grow sick at heart. This is again the fear. The speaker is definitely building up, if you like, or building a mood here. He wants us to think about those moments where we worry so much about death that we shudder, tremble and grow sick at heart. Soak up this scary feeling, because he's about, again, if you like, in line 14, 15, he said, go forth under the open sky and list to nature's teachings while from all around. Here suddenly we get a little bit of hope. We are free. The speaker tells us, to be okay, to go outside under the open sky. And, that's a, big relief, if you like. We are given some kind of freedom for some, little break. We are trapped in a grave underground, as he said in line 12. And suddenly we go back, or we are back with nature. And I think this is interesting, and this is the romantic thing about it. We are being told to listen, to list. Here again, a very fancy, if you like, poetic line, if you like, to the teachings of nature. These teachings, or those teachings, are all around us in the great outdoors. Line 16, 17, again, he says, earth and her waters and the depth of air comes a still voice, so yet a few days and thee. Again, really here we see the romanticism, if you like, and the romance to some extent, or the romantic thing. The voice of nature comes forth, from the earth, the waters, the air. It's really important that the poem calls nature's voice a still voice. That means calm and quiet, and gives this line a feeling of peace and comfort. Things are going to be okay, he said. Well, don't worry. Or maybe not, I don't know. But, this is the idea. What's up with when he said, yet a few days, he said, the idea maybe we are waiting for a while. We won't be buried forever, of course, if you like, in a way, metaphorically speaking. Well, at the end of line 16, you can see there's another bit of shift. Apparently, something is going to happen in a few days, and we are guessing it's going maybe to have another, or maybe something to do with death again. And line 18, he said, all behold, see no more. Here again, we'll go back to bad news, where we will be back, back into the grave. Apparently, we're going back, or we are going to die in a few days. The speaker tries to make it sound pretty okay, but really he's telling us we are going to die soon. Even the sun, which sees everything, as he said, all beholding, won't be able to see us anymore. We are just going to vanish. Well, this is really the tragic and sad thing about it. Again, as I said, the whole poem is about, the view to see how and what death really is like. In all this, again, line 19, 21, he said, in all his course, nor yet in the cold ground where thy pale form was laid with many tears, nor in the embrace of ocean shall exist. Again, really a nice, the sun, as you can see, runs all his course. In the sun, of course, the path of the sun follows, the word his to go to the sun. We also won't be in the in the cold ground where our crying relatives bury our corpse during our funeral. Again, we won't be in the embrace of the ocean either. We wait, and we shall see where we will be, Again, we have talked about a land burial and a sea burial, And again, we can say, what next? Maybe cremation, as you sometimes burn their dead. This poem is a kind, again, of really annoyance everywhere right now. But there is good news, again, coming at the end, as we shall see. Line 22, 23 said, thy image, earth, that nourished thee shall claim thy growth to be resolved to earth again. So we will be happy to be reclaimed again by the earth, our mother, big mother. Cremation then. So where does our image go when we die? If it's not sinking in the sea or being buried in the ground, well, it goes back to the earth, as he said. It was nourishment from the earth that allowed our body to grow, and now our body will be turned again, as he said, resolved back into earth again. This is again like that old expression you may have heard, where you say ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And I think this is interesting. Line 24, 25 again, he said, and lost each human trace, surrendering up thine individual being. So here again, when we die, according to this poem, we are going to lose everything. We lose what made us human, each human trace. We give up our true individual being. Basically, we lose everything when we die. And I think this is the idea here. Line 26, 27 again, to mix forever with the elements, to be a brother to the insensible rock. Again, our speaker is really here in love with the images of going back to earth. And I think this is, in a way, as we shall see, maybe this is something to do with a romantic idea, maybe Wordsworthian and maybe Coleridge's, mostly Wordsworthian idea to think of of everything to do with the world and nature itself, and all the elements in nature as being divine to some extent. So he said, we'll go back to earth and we will be there. So he tells us our elements with nature. We will basically be on different, maybe we will be maybe no different from an insensible rock, as he said. Insensible just means, again, unable to feel, of course. So all the touch, sight, hearing, emotion, etc., if you like, are really lost here as human, if you like, qualities. Now, line 29, 28, 29, again, notice, and to this sluggish cold, which the rude swain turns with his share and treads upon oak. Again, just to make sure we go, or we got the point, the poem again drives it in again to say that this time with maybe some fancy vocabulary words he uses there, when he said sluggish cold, after we are dead. Cold here means, again, to say being dead. And again, sluggish means to some extent, lifeless and heavy, if you like. So the speaker really works this image of our bodies turning into dirt, if you like, into earth. Here, he talks about how a country boy, like a swain, as he said, a pretty popular chap in older nature, if you like, poems, who digs up that coat of dirt with his, for example, plow or share, and walks, treads, he said, all over it. So that's just how you will be after you are dead, as he said. Even the swains, he said, are going to step on you. And I think this is natural, every time people walk over graves sometimes when they don't maybe recognize them or see them properly. So in line 30 again, he said, shall send his roots abroad and pierce thy mold. So our dead bodies will be food for oak trees as they send their roots out through the earth. Those roots will go through the mold, the soil, of our bodies, and so on. Now, as you can see, really, the poem is very long. As you know, I sent you these notes, so I'm trying here to summarize them for you, but since you have them with you, really, I'm not going to go back every and maybe re-explain to you every line. Now, I've like in a video like this. So really quickly, maybe go back to the analysis of the poem. The analysis, as you know, the poem really, it has a lot of things. Maybe the first thing I would talk about is symbolism, or the symbols that we have in this poem. Now, the main important symbol is nature, as you can see. Thanatopsis, nature, is a force and an idea, but also she is like a lady. This poetic trick is called personification. By turning an idea into a woman with a voice and a personality, really nature more relatable. Maybe we belong to it, and also more comforting. We have been taught to associate women with nature, or nature, again, with kindness and warmth and love and so on. And that's why we always use the word Mother Nature, you know? So the poem picks up here on that and uses the idea of a lady named Nature to soothe our fears. And I think this is very funny. Maybe to some extent, maybe some people may not like this, feminists or other critics may not like that, but you know, this is it. We always associate, I think, women or the female to land and to nature and to the beauty and everything to do with beauty. And I think this is to do with nature again here. As you can see, as we said in line 1 and line 15 and line 5, these really typical examples to go back to the idea of nature as a woman. In line 1 and line 5, again, you can see nature has a beautiful voice. She's a sensitive, very sensitive to our feelings and needs. Again, she glides into our sad thoughts and, brightens up our life. She talks to us to comfort us. Again, nature is not just a bunch of rocks, dolphins, person, a friend, a lover, a mother, a sister, a wife, or, all those really lovely things you can imagine about the idea of woman. She's there to help us out when we get scared about dying. Always when you feel anything, you always say, oh, my mother, we always say, Ammi, وينك يا أمي, and this is really very, very interesting, when you call your mother, to do with everything, your nature, the person you love, and everything. Now, the second, really, as I said, the main point is death, simple. Again, we said that Thanatopsis is a poem about death. It's really probably not that surprising that the images of graves and tombs and coffins are all over the place, really everywhere in the poem. One of the major ideas that holds this poem together is really the contrast between the freedom and the open space of nature and the confinement, if you like, or the imprisonment of the grave. When the speaker grave in this poem, he's usually talking about really a very scary, dark, unhappy, miserable place. By the end of the day, of course, he helps us to see why it might be, if you like, so ugly at the end of the day. And I think this idea was repeated many times in the poem, like in line 12 and line 45, again, very clearly to talk about, this question of grave. Like when in line 12, it's used like a narrow house. We think here of as a metaphor for the coffin. Again, in line 45, again, he uses the word like the great tomb of man. Again, a very amazing picture to talk here about a general tomb, a general massive grave of man. I think this is, again, if you remember, we go back to Philip Freneau when he was talking about, again, that about the Red Indians, how they bury their dead. And I think you remember that. I think, again, when he's talking about how Indians bury their dead in massive graves, which is again to make the dead feel a bit maybe social, not to be on their own, which is again very funny. Now, the second or third symbol is the sun, really, the word sun. The sun in this poem is, again, a symbol of the beauty and power of life and nature. The sun is eternal and bright and looks down at the whole world all at once. The sun rules the land of the living, and when we die, you leave the sun behind forever. It's important to note that even though the sun is a symbol of life, it isn't really alive. The poem makes a big deal here out of the eternal life of the sun, as opposed, if you like, to the brief life of humans. Again, this is referred to in the poem many times, mainly line 8, line 45, to refer to the question of the power, the amazing symbol of the sun. The sun here, when you can see it as, all beholding, and again in line 38, you can see that as the ancient sun, which is again the importance and the watching over everything, to be like God-like figure, if you like, because of course in many ancient societies the sun was seen like a god, if you like. Again, line 45, you can see that, again, you see the shining, golden, shining, beautiful, lovely sun shining over contrast to death. The second and the fourth, I should say, really, the fourth symbol is the ocean or ocean. So the ocean is another powerful and important representation of the natural world in this poem. The poem, again, as you can see, the ocean, giant, scary, again, maybe a bit sad, but that's a big contrast to the shining golden sun, for example. It's not part of the human world of death and fear, but still it is maybe a kind of dark thing, because the ocean could be dangerous and could be really devastating, could kill you, if you don't in the middle of the ocean, you definitely die. G3, again, you can see this referred to, the speaker talks about the embrace, the big thing about the ocean is just another part of natural world that's going to outlast you, will live more than you. Okay, and again in line 43, we see this again, a kind of subtle personification when you see the old ocean sounds like a person here, if you like. It's again could refer to the Greek mythology, or maybe to one of those heroes in the Trojan War, mainly Poseidon, one of those big figures in the Trojan War, as mentioned by Homer. Now, the fifth really symbol is the couch, the sofa, if you like. The image of the couch is important here. It's a little bit maybe mysterious, but what is a couch, if you like, doing in a poem like that? Are we going to be watching or playing a game after we die? Maybe. Not really. In Thanatopsis here, the couch turns out to be like a metaphor for the grave. Well, I don't know. This is a funny, really, metaphor to use the couch for a grave. It refers to the place we go to where of course, we die. It's not really, as for him, he wants to say, it's not really scary or awful. Could be, as the Indians, as I said to their, or believed in their people. So here again in line 33 and line 80, you see the word couch being used again to say about eternal resting place, or again in line 80, you say the key moment for the couch. Again, you see here the final image, the speaker has turned everything around. Instead of worrying about death, we should walk into it happily, full of trust and faith. He sells that concept by comparing death to lying down on a couch, wrapped in a cozy blanket for a nice sleep. Well, I don't think so, but I mean, this is what the poem is saying. Different ways. One of the big ideas in Thanatopsis, again, is that all people in the history of the world are part of a long line, again, heading our little person or caravan thing. Now we imagine imagine ourselves all asks us to imagine ourselves innumerable caravan, heading towards that mysterious realm of death. Again, this is the innumerable caravan. Again, I think this is very interesting. Now, the whole poem, as you know, it's written to some extent in blank verse, and blank verse means unrhymed iambic pentameter. As you can see, the whole poem is really written in that. Each line has 5, if you like, feet, and the line, as I said, iambic. And if you look at it, really, the whole poem is in this, which is, I think, very simple style or meter. Most of the time, I think, most of the English, or I should say, or most of the poetry, really, maybe nearly 90% of English poetry is done in iambic. Now, another point concerning the speaker here, if we mention the speaker, who is the speaker, you know, how, if you like, how do you picture the speaker here of this poem? Now, the speaker really, in a way, we don't, we know to some extent, maybe, something about this thing. Think about it, you know, the whole poem, maybe people will not think of it, it's about religion. Still, if we are not just looking at the speaker styles, we totally hear the voice of a preacher in this poem. First of all, it's a preacher's job to tell you what you should be doing and how you should be feeling. And this speaker does a lot of that. He's also encouraging us and the reader and the listener when you say, you also, or also a little bit, to some extent, as you can see, and you have seen, really, it's very scary, preaching, and yet at the same time, you know, to some extent, scaring us. And I think this scare, again, ladies, I think we have talked about that before. In most of the poems, we have seen this idea in American literature and American scholarship about this fear, and, you know, the absolute always reminding of people of being terrible and being guilty and being ugly and so on. It gives you, as you can see, it gives us encouragement, but yet at the same time, as I said, it's really scary and you know, terrifying. So in a way, there are exciting stand-up and, if you like, shout moments. You know, when you say that things will be okay at the end of the day, if you like. This is, you know, the idea for him, as if to say, we will be fine. You know, if you are really a good believer, you will be fine. You know, overall, this is really, if you like, sounds like a message or like the sermon. If you are a believer, then you won't worry about death. And I think, you know, to some extent, people say this, and I've heard people saying that. In a way, yes, because we say, in a way, al-maut haq. Yes, absolutely. You know, so again, if you go back to the setting, here we maybe talk about it a little bit. This might throw you off again when you talk about it, because the whole poem is about, you know, how you feel and the feeling and all this. So all the things we see and hear about seem to be far away from reality, as if we were really looking down onto them from away, or from far, far away from, you know, from us, from reality. So still, if you like, it's not like being like in a zooming along behind a plastic window, for example. So in a way, there's nothing really noisy or cramped or maybe terrifying to some extent, but there is, I think. So the speaker, in a way, gives us this feeling, this grand tour of nature. We if you like, check out hills and valleys and streams and rivers and so on, and deserts everywhere, you know, forests and Pacific and so on. You know, all this we're seeing a bigger picture, if you like. So again, if you think about themes, I think they are again maybe the same thing about what I said about symbols to some extent, because they are connected, because I talked about death and ocean and nature, and the same thing here. The themes, yes, they are. Again, the theme of death is definitely, this is the big idea in the poem. The whole poem is about death, about dying, domineering idea. Death, is the main topic which we see across all the time and all over the world. The poem talks about how it makes us feel and how it's related to spirituality, to history and nature and so on. Mostly, its purpose here is to remind you that you are going to die anyway, but death isn't something to be afraid of. As I said, just really. So the poem gives you concrete examples, if you like, of the terror and horror and the inevitability of death without giving the reader any clear reason to feel better about it, Again, then the word nature, which is again another big theme in this poem, in Thanatopsis, is definitely about nature. Human beings come and go, but nature is always there. It remains. The hills, rivers, everything are eternal, almost, intimidating. The poem is about this vast, powerful forces of nature that swallow us up and keep right on moving. Nature is not all cold and indifferent, though, he said. Indeed, the poem starts out with the idea that nature is like a nurturing, caring woman who comforts us when we start to fear of death. The natural world is the ultimate misery. And I think this is interesting and really nice about the whole poem here. Again, another theme, which is like when we say hope versus sadness. Yes, we have some sadness, but yet we are told to be hopeful. Yeah, we are not sure that Thanatopsis is completely sad poem. I'm not saying completely sad. In fact, we completely separate death and sadness is a theme that crops up all over this poem. It touches on the sadness we feel when we think about death and the grief people feel. What's going on with this? Should continue. Sorry. So this is really the idea here, touches on the sadness we feel when we think about to die, as a way of clarifying and focusing the big cosmic concerns in the poem. And maybe the last theme here is, as you know, religion. Thanatopsis really does not talk directly about any kind of religion. Is not talking and is not, teaching any kind of religion. Still, the idea of dead up in questions of spirituality. It's like an undercurrent in this poem, rarely out in the open, but always there. What happens to us after we die? Does the soul live on? Those are definitely spiritual questions. And even if the poem does not address them directly, they are still definitely in play. Thus, in a way, the poem, we should have a spiritual relationship with nature. Indeed, it's, or nature, I should say, or the whole poem, if you like, really finishes off with a particularly spiritual ending when the speaker seems to be asking us to believe in an afterlife. And I think this is really an interesting thing. Again, here to finish with Alazina yu'min. And I think this is a lovely thing here, to believe in the afterlife, and I think this is very interesting end here, to believe in the in the afterlife. Okay, so that's it really about the whole poem. I know it could be, could be a long video, but You see, I tried to, wrap up and summarize the whole thing for you. Again, everything I have said a little bit to summarize it for you a little bit, and I hope now you get the whole idea clearly, there. Okay. Now, good luck, and I will see you later in another video. Okay. Bye bye.